The real-life superhero Iceberg.
So you think superheroes just exist in the comic books, huh? Well, evidently, they don't. As of like 3 months ago, I became a superhero. Not only that though, I went down a rabbit hole to discover everything there is to know about superheroes in real life. And today I'm going to be sharing that with you, because oh boy, there's a lot. Now, mind you, quite a lot of people on this list here are currently actively patrolling their cities. So I didn't want to do a list that's based on like who's better or who's more legit than the others. None of that. We're just doing an iceberg, this is like what all the normies know over here, and then this down here, this is what like nobody knows about. You're gonna learn all of that. Whew. Yeah, that's big. We're gonna tackle that today. Let's get into the real life superhero Iceberg. Hit the get like a sound effect, like a don't you dare. Oh, hold on a minute. Let me just. I would love to stay in the super suit, but we got a lot to cover here, and it's getting hot. All right, I'm gonna switch over to the voiceover mode. Voiceover mode. Do a barrel roll. RLSH, alright. I mean, it just stands for real life superhero. That's what this whole list is about. What is this doing? That's the first thing on the list. Well, I gotta clarify something, alright? RLSH nowadays kind of refers to its own little subculture online. While people have been doing this for a lot longer than even the internet has been around, the term RLSH sort of popped up around like, I don't know, 2010, 2012, and it started being used in forums to be applied to people like Phoenix Jones, Master Legend, the Xtreme Justice League. A lot of these names you're gonna see further on this iceberg, and it's really just people who put on a super suit and go out and help people. And the way they help really varies depending on who's doing it and how long they've been doing it, right? But in the iceberg, we're gonna see a pretty wide variety. Mind you, I refer to it as like a community because people who get this term applied to them end up they find each other and they talk to each other, right? And it becomes a community. However, the term is just a term that people use online, regardless of whether or not the person it's applying to knows. Like, think of Phoenix Jones or Rock Hard. Neither of these people knew of the term RLSH until they started doing it, and then it was applied to them. So now that we know the difference between RLSH and just the general idea of superheroes in real life, let's move on to Kickass. Kickass started as a comic book in 2008 and was very quickly picked up for a movie in 2010. Now, the story itself is pretty much just real life superheroes, the movie. RLSH even. This nerdy high schooler, Dave, decides to put on a super suit and start helping people, fighting crime. Then things just get completely crazy. This was directly inspired by the RLSH community in the early 2000s.
Nice. Baby go poop. Baby go poop for $13.
Mark Miller himself, the writer of the comics, had stated this. Now in the early 2000s, that was only really like, I don't know, the Extreme Justice League, Danger Man. There weren't a whole lot going around, but there's plenty, sure. It was thanks to the movie though in 2010 that the RLSH community really blew up, sparking a whole barrage of different superhero groups all throughout the country. But if there was no RLSH, no Kickass. But subsequently, no Kickass, no RLSH. At least to the extent that it's at today.
Wow.
And now Kickass may have brought a lot of attention to the RLSH community, but there's been a name I've mentioned quite a few times now that really got the ball rolling, especially in 2012. And that is Phoenix Jones. Phoenix Jones. Alright, I don't even know where to start with this guy. I've had to re-record his segment like 3 times now because it's too much. There's so much to talk about Phoenix Jones, he could be his own video.
Wow.
But I don't really want to give him all that time, because this dude's a fraud, and that would mostly just be talking about a bunch of lies, a bunch of hullabaloo. I'll give you the Sparks Note version, alright? Now one day, Benjamin Fodor, amateur MMA fighter turned superhero, was out and about in an alleyway with his son around broken glass. His car was broken into, and he left his son unattended by that broken glass. And then his son fell in the broken glass, and he got a boo-boo. And Phoenix Jones went from boo-boo to Batman, and he donned the mask. Well, actually, my bad. He didn't go straight into superhero mode. He said it was an accident. He accidentally became a superhero. It was all an accident. He just started putting on a mask and going out and helping people. But it wasn't about a superhero thing. It was just his own thing. And then he spent $10,000 on a gold and black bulletproof super suit. But it's not. He didn't mean to do the superhero thing. That was an accident. Either way, Phoenix Jones made most of his rounds around bars where people would get into bar fights and he'd break it up. That was his main thing. And gee, I wonder who's gonna win. An MMA fighter in bulletproof armor or a random drunk guy? I don't know. We better find out though. Somebody get death battle. So Phoenix Jones got quite a bit of popularity there. He even started a team called the Rain City Superhero Movement. I'll talk about them a little bit later on the list. He was on documentaries, he got on the news, on the podcasts, everything. Phoenix Jones was massive. I mean, besides Kickass, Phoenix Jones is probably the largest thing RLSH related. And that makes sense. You know, Phoenix Jones was a lot more actionable than other real-life superheroes at the time. You know, getting into fights. But he would lift himself into a legendary status by the stories he told in interviews.
How many arrests have you made?
That are provable. We've made somewhere around the 50 mark.
How about not provable?
Probably somewhere around the 120, 130 mark.
130 arrests.
I went out and fight crime the day before our first date, and I was planning on taking the night off, but I did it anyway, and I ended up getting stabbed. And we have a date the next day, and I can't go to the hospital, and I can't, reveal my secret identity. So I thought to myself, what do? I'll just glue it. So I went home, I glued it shut, and I went on our date. In the middle of our date, I start bleeding at the dinner table. So it was pretty much secret identity was gone.
You are pure romance.
Yeah, 15 minutes in, I'm like, listen, I'm bleeding profusely from my abdomen. I got stabbed the other day, dressed up like a superhero. It was an interesting reveal.
And this showcases why I don't really want to give you like a full breakdown of his history as a superhero. Well, at least for right now. Comment down below if you want like a full video on Phoenix Jones and stuff he's allegedly done, but a lot of it just a bunch of hoopla, because, well, I genuinely couldn't tell you how much of it is even real.
That are provable. We've made somewhere around the 50 mark.
50 provable arrests. All right. Where's the proof? There's a handful of videos of him getting into a couple fights, a couple de-escalation situations. I like that, de-escalation situation. Say that 5 times fast. Like there's a couple things here and there, but 50 provable arrests.
How about not provable?
Probably somewhere around the 120, 130 mark.
130 arrests.
130, 120, it doesn't matter. Those are still ginormous. Phoenix Jones is a guy who likes to hop on the news and gets camera crews to follow him when he goes on his patrols. And you mean to tell me he's done hundreds of very exciting sounding arrests and only caught like a couple of, minor squabbles on camera? That's it? Really? Out of the hundreds he's allegedly done? That's crazy. Hey, what about that knife wound he said he took to the abdomen? He got stabbed, right?
And I was planning on taking the night off, but I did it anyway. And I ended up getting stabbed.
I don't know. Did Phoenix Jones just forget that he's also an MMA fighter? You don't wear a whole lot of clothes when you're in the ring. Where's the stab wound?
And I can't go to the hospital, and I can't, reveal my secret identity. So I thought to myself, what do? I'll just glue it.
Right, because you couldn't just tell the doctor that you had a workplace accident, or you and your friends were, I don't know, playing with some swords you bought from the sword store at the mall or something. I don't know.
In the middle of our date, I start bleeding at the dinner table.
Pure romance.
Yeah, 15 minutes in, I'm like, listen, I'm bleeding profusely from my abdomen. I got stabbed the other day.
Bleeding profusely, hours after gluing it shut. That must have been a pretty gnarly wound, I'm just saying. You ever see the difference between a stitched wound and a wound that just heals with nothing done, or just it being like taped or glued or something? It looks completely different. It's a very noticeable wound. Whatever. I'm not gonna harp on the wound thing and the lies that were told here, because, well, guess what? I'm a superhero who's got superhero friends, and some of those superhero friends were friends with Phoenix Jones during the time when he was really popular, and they got to meet the guy. Take, for example, the Devil of Brooklyn. He's been doing this superhero thing since 2001, and unlike Phoenix Jones, he's still doing it today. And a dude like Devil is pretty curious, so I'm sure he asked him about some of the taller tales he told in interviews, and Phoenix just had to tell him, yeah, he made it up. So after a couple years of playing superhero, Phoenix Jones, he got caught by an undercover cop trying to sell Molly. That's, you know what they say.
You either die a hero, or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain.
Yeah, that's what they say. And on top of lying about his superheroics, he looked down on other RLSH at the time. He saw their more charitable work as not amounting to the crime fighting that he was up to, even though he really wasn't. He called other RLSH real-life sandwich handlers. But truth is, there's a lot of other ways to be a hero other than just punching bad guys in the face. It could be as simple as cleaning up trash, handing out resources and supplies to the needy. It could be helping a grandma across the street. Hell, you don't even have to be a hero in the real world. You could do it online like our next entry, Anonymous. Now originally they started as a bunch of trolls on 4chan, just mostly pulling pranks for shock value. They come from 4chan, so you can imagine what kind of shock value they were into. This was in the early 2000s, 2003, 2004. It wasn't until 2008 that they started to band together to do something that was a little bit more positive. They went from trolls to hacktivists. Their first target was the Church of Scientology. That's when people started putting on these guy faux masks and going to protests claiming, "We are anonymous, we are legion." But that's also when they started becoming a little bit more organized in the ways that they target groups or ideas that they disagree with. They do DDoS attacks, they leak information, digital protests, and they coordinate real-life protests, primarily to fight against censorship, corruption, and different kinds of abuses of power, The real-life superhero community had an informal alliance with Anonymous during Occupy Wall Street. Some people who are RLSH are also anonymous because those kind of hacky computer skills just really help when it comes to, being a real-life superhero. Programming. Programming doesn't just help with hacking, it also helps with robotics. So the state of robotics right now is kind of insane and almost to a superhero-y degree, and it all started in 1992 when a shoot-off was founded from MIT called Boston Dynamics. Originally, they mostly helped with robotics research for the military. So you could basically think of them as like the Stark Industries of the real world. But after being passed through Google, SoftBank, and now Hyundai, they also moved over to the industry and commercial markets. Now obviously robots are kind of like everywhere. Boston Dynamics isn't the only company making robots, but they do focus on robots focused on emergency situations, rescue situations, and militaristic needs that end up feeling very superhero-like. So I put them on the Iceberg, but to be honest, I really wanted to talk about the state of robotics in general. Yeah, they're not the only ones making robots. Come on. There are people building this stuff out of scraps. I mean, imagine having like a sidekick, a robot sidekick. You know what? Write that down. I need a robot sidekick. I'll call him Horizon. There we go. And there are countless YouTubers too who also, make cool robotics projects that just are straight up out of comic books. So when you mix robotics engineering with superheroes, you get big YouTubers like Hacksmith Industries. Around 2012 to 2013, a Canadian engineer named James Hobson, aka The Hacksmith, started posting his engineering experiments online. He's making a lot of growth, especially with this series called Make It Real in 2015, which became like a signature series. They were building a lot of fictional superhero gadgets, which is why they're on this list. Once they had a full workshop with an actual staff, they rebranded from The Hacksmith to Hacksmith Industries. And they've made some crazy stuff, starting with exoskeletons, grappling hooks like Batman, Captain America's shield, they got Mjolnir, they built lightsabers, Magneto and Iron Man helmets, bionic arms. Right now they're working on power armor, not exactly superheroes, but close enough. They have made a plethora of superhero gadgets, and a lot of them are also functional. Functional. A lot of them are functional. We'll be covering other engineering YouTubers who do very superheroic projects. I just think Hacksmith Industries is probably the largest of the engineering superhero YouTubers. Sorry, Mark Rober just doesn't really hit that superhero itch, you know? But on top of making a bunch of really cool superhero gadgets, they tested technology that already exists that's also very superhero-like, like the jet suits. They're kind of like jetpacks, but jetpacks are so
2000 and late.
Nowadays, there's a lot of different kinds of personal flying devices, and this is actually kind of covering all of it in this section of the iceberg. But let's go over a brief history lesson. In 1961, we got the first real public demo of a jetpack, and it got like 20 seconds of flight. Let's go. But these 20 seconds of flight birthed Jetpack Man. To be honest, for a long while, we would just kind of push it to 30 seconds and then just a little bit more. It's still not too long of flight time. By the early 2010s, we could get several minutes of flight, all right? And then 2017 rolls around and we get the jet suit. Boom. Which can now go up to 10 minutes. Yep, that's where we're at now. But hey, 10 minutes is a hell of a lot longer than 20 seconds. You could do a lot in 10 minutes. So we go from jetpacks to these cool jet suits that feel like Iron Man, but there's also crazy things like the Zapata flyboard. Look at this. This is literally just like Green Goblin, but in real life. That's crazy. We're also getting a lot more eVTOLs, like the Jetson 1, to start rolling in like you're the Fantastic Four or something. And this sort of technology is getting so accessible that people are making it at home. Look at this Omni hoverboard. This is insane. The main thing we gotta work on, I think, is how long we can fly for, and that's mostly an energy problem. So
Don't work on water unless you've got power.
We'll get there one day, hopefully. So let's take a break from like superhero technology and let's talk about some more real life superheroes. But this time we're talking about the oldest superhero team in the world that is still active to this day, the Xtreme Justice League. Originally, it was founded in 2006 by Mr. Xtreme. He had a difficult upbringing as a child and then ended up joining with the Guardian Angels, who are also on this list, but they're further down, so, you know, stay tuned. But eventually quit from doing that to go do his own thing, be a superhero. The same year he became Mr. Xtreme, he also founded the Xtreme Justice League, and his very first earliest patrols was with the Vigilante Spider. But pretty soon, quite a lot of people were going to be joining. The Grim, Knight, Hot Flash, Kevlar Cat, Midnight Highwayman, Freedom Fighter, Roroni, MD Moxie, the Urban Avenger, Radnor, the Orange Cricket, a lot of people, alright? You could call me an honorary member. I got the badge. But we're not gonna do that, we're gonna move on. In 2010, they began Project Hope. There's more about Hope later also in this iceberg, but it's important to note that the Xtreme Justice League, the main contributors to creating Project Hope, which is basically just this giant outreach event where superheroes from all around the world come together. They do one massive patrol, essentially. The Xtreme Justice League got massively popular in the real-life superhero community. They were in documentaries, on the news. They had allies with other teams like the California Initiative and the California Ronin, which is kind of funny because those two teams have similar history. We'll get to that when we get to that, alright? The Xtreme Justice League shaped a lot of the SoCal RLSH scene. They did a lot of your usual RLSH handout type of patrols, but they also did safety patrols quite a lot too. They'd break up quite a lot of fights, Phoenix Jones styles as well.
This weekend, they say they rescued a man who was getting seriously beat up in the gas lab. NBC7's Nicole Gonzalez is live tonight. She's got some new details. Nicole?
Yes, witnesses say that fight was extremely violent. It happened on 4th and Market late Friday night, and those superheroes protected the victim and stayed until police arrived.
In 2011, they were on the news for their efforts trying to help catch the Chula Vista groper. But then tragedy would strike the XJL when fellow member Roroni had gotten into a head-on collision with two cars on a rainy morning and passed away. Roroni was well respected within the community. Reading the comments on his memorial shows how respected he was, and his fellow members of the XJL were the pallbearers at his funeral. The XJL went on strong afterwards, but definitely not as strong. Members were in and out. The Grim, one of the longtime director of operations, ended up stepping down from his role, but stayed part of the XJL all the way up until 2020 when Mr. Xtreme announced his retirement. The Grim and many other members also ended up departing to form X Faction, which is, yeah, another entry on the Iceberg. So leadership transitioned over to Knight and MDM Moxie until 2021, a year later, when MDM Moxie also left the team. So now, the XGL is led by Knight. It's pretty much down to the core four: Knight, Kevlar Cat, Hot Flash, and the newest member, Ruby Magnolia. And the XJL will go do patrols with current RLSH in different states. And there's a lot of like honorary members. The influence of the XJL is massive, at least as far as it goes within the RLSH community. So let's shift gears back over to something that influences pretty much everybody, including real-life superheroes: exoskeletons. So these things are like beta mech suits, beta Iron Man suits, and for the most part, they're used for enhancing strength. So the earliest models were in the 1960s, and it's called the Hardy Man. This thing looks pretty cool, and it could lift up to 250 pounds like it was nothing, but the thing itself weighed 1,500 pounds, so you would need like 6 of them to lift one. So unfortunately, it never really got out of the lab. It wasn't really too useful. Throughout the early history, most of the exoskeleton research was done through military research, DARPA and defense programs, you know. In the early 2000s, we got Sarcos, XOS, which was basically like a clunky Iron Man prototype. Look at this thing. But a cooler looking one that also came out in the early 2000s is an example of how it's used in the medical field. The hybrid assistive limb may look like a Tron-style super suit, but it's mostly used for medical use, say for somebody who's experienced paralysis of their lower body. Maybe the body part can't move, but the brain does still send a signal. And so what the HAL does, read that electrical signal to power the exoskeleton itself and then move the limb. So it's mostly used for physical therapy. By the 2010s, Lockheed Martin would have Hulk. It's just called Hulk. That's awesome. But one of the main problems was that it was to help soldiers, you know, carry with heavy loads, but it was very energy inefficient and also still too heavy. So if it ran out of energy, it was very unwieldy. So they stopped using it. It's not used anymore. And for some industrial examples, you've got something like Hero Wear. Hero Wear is mostly just for, like, you know, helping you at work. This is like if you work at a factory, maybe invest in something like this. Except that, haha, you can't. This is your boss has to, because you can only buy it in bulk. I don't get it. How do I buy this? I chose ones that either looked like or had hero-sounding names, but there's a lot of different types of exoskeletons made by a lot of different kind of companies and countries, right? Oh, remember Hacksmith? These guys made an exoskeleton. You can make an exoskeleton. Hell, you don't even need a technology to make an exoskeleton. You could do it with just some hard work and time, aka Kung Fu, aka Shaolin, aka Shaolin Monks. That's the next entry. Let's hit it. Shaolin's got a special place in my heart. And it's mostly just because I took it for like almost a decade. So look, I'm not biased, you know, like, why is Shaolin here and not different martial arts? Where? You're biased because it's your martial arts. No, I'm not. All right, let me explain. When it comes to martial arts in comic books, there is no other martial arts that is as mystified as Kung Fu has been. You know, a superhero learns boxing and they become a good boxer. They learn jiu-jitsu and they're a good fighter. But then suddenly a superhero learns Kung Fu and what happens? They get magical powers. That's what happens. and it's not just embellished within comic books. Shaolin Kung Fu is heavily mystified in real life too. And there's a good reason for this. Part of that reason is because, well, it's really, really old. The Shaolin Monastery was found in the 400s. The 400s. Now, there's a myth that states a monk named Bodhidharma taught the monks Shaolin Kung Fu, but that's not true, all right? The very first disciples of the very first preacher of the first Shaolin temple were already exceptional with martial skills. So, like, they were just kind of already doing it. The reality of the situation is that these two probably just liked it, and it just steamrolled from there. There's nothing to do in the forest anyways. Might as well develop your own martial arts. You know, mind, body, spirit, let's go. by the 7th century, they've already gained a reputation as like these fighters who have merged their spiritual essence with their fighting warrior spirits. So they ended up helping Emperor Tang against a bunch of rebels. This is what ended up cementing their legacy, but also what ended up turning into legend. While it's true that Shaolins ended up helping in this rebellion, and they were rewarded for it, it's not true that 13 monks took on an entire army. For the most part, the legends of what exactly happened, that's made up. And that really led to a lot of different supernatural myths about what a Shaolin monk is able to do. Nowadays, however, the actual Shaolin monastery is more of a performance thing. It's not really, they're not really training a bunch of warriors to fend off against a rebellion. They just demonstrate impossible seeming feats. Breaking metal bars over their head and like lying on top of spears. Just doing crazy stuff. Some of you may be wondering, why not ninjutsu on this list? Because, that's another one of the martial arts that's been heavily mystified. But this is the real life superhero Iceberg, not the real life ninja Iceberg, so get out of here. Both of them end up being embellished with the same mystical, spiritual energy called chi or ki, which that's going to be later on the list as well. We got a lot of teasers up here. But in terms of what this chi energy can do, well, there's a lot. For the most part, though, it's basically just psychic powers. The word psychic can kind of mean a lot of different things for people. For the most part, when people say it, they're talking about seeing into the future. But there's a lot of different kinds of psionic abilities beyond just looking into the future. For example, talking to ghosts, or moving things with your mind, or removing your spirit from your body. And these sort of phenomenon have been happening basically since the dawn of humanity, but the term psychic wouldn't come until the late 1800s. There was a big culture hit of this spiritual movement here in the West where seances and spiritual mediums were making a lot of money. Who am I kidding? Psychics still make money today. It would really take a superhero comic book turn when the military was interested in what they could do with psychic espionage. For example, Project Stargate or MK Ultra. Now, whether or not you believe in, psychic powers isn't really the point of this entry here. The point of this entry is to show how it ended up influencing like a lot of pop culture, especially comic books. In fact, I think comic books might be the place where psychics show up the most, probably. And it especially makes sense when you start looking past like the common idea of a psychic being like, oh, I saw the future. Like you got some crazy psychic abilities, especially when you get into the kinesis things, like pyrokinesis. That's just fire powers. You got hydrokinesis, geokinesis, aerokinesis. That's just Avatar: The Last Airbender right there, basically. These are basically just scientific parapsychological terms that are used for superpowers. No wonder it's seen so frequently in comic books. And between thousands of years of written history accounting these types of events and military contracts researching this, as well as scientific research labs being built just to research psychic phenomena, it becomes a very frequently used excuse in sci-fi and comic books. Because it's one of the most realistic avenues of superpowers, pretty much. Realistic to a degree, of course, because, well, this is still up to belief. You don't have to believe in psychics, because you could also just get a computer chip in your brain. BCI is just the bridge between a machine and your brain. It stands for Brain-Computer Interface. Pretty straightforward, and it could work either non-invasively through like an EEG headset, or invasively through an implant like a Neuralink. However, right now, Neuralinks aren't really like a thing that's out, really. And I don't know, you could have these cool technokinesis type superpowers if you're willing to, see advertisements in your dreams, I guess. But it is thanks to BCI that we're able to use prosthetic limbs. See, originally the term was coined in the 1960s and they used EEGs to control simple devices. Then DARPA got involved. At first they funded the research to help with pilots and soldiers, but then it started helping with paralyzed patients. That was by the 90s. But then by the 2000s, we would get the best toy to ever hit planet Earth, Mind Flex. And then we would forget about it, like very shortly after. Unfortunately. However, that's an example of a non-invasive BCI, an EEG, right? Neuralink is hoping to do something completely different, and the things it could do is what lands it on the real life superhero iceberg, because it's basically it's technokinesis. You could be like that dude from Big Hero 6. If other people have a brain implant, then that's telepathy. You could think to them. You could think up information and you could Google it in your head. You could recall information in your memories perfectly and be like a super detective. You could not only augment every single one of your senses, but you could also never lose those senses ever. All you gotta do is let Elon Musk put a computer chip in your brain. That's it. Just that's all you gotta do. Yeah, we're scratching that one off. Let's move on. Speaking of Elon Musk, Tesla, Nikola Tesla. That's the next topic. Tesla is the blueprint for the super scientist trope. You're not a mad scientist if you don't have a Tesla coil in your headquarters, all right? Tesla briefly worked with Thomas Edison when he emigrated to the U.S. in 1884, but then they split over creative differences. Edison and Tesla would then get into a battle of wits, AC versus DC. But Tesla would win as he perfected the AC system, and it would become the backbone to the modern electrical grid. Tesla basically envisioned the modern world, but in the 1800s. He experimented with wireless power and radio control. I mean, he debuted an RC boat, and then people thought he was using telepathy. He even wanted to build this massive tower built for global wireless communication. Sound familiar? It lost funding though and was torn down, unfortunately. He was just very ahead of the time, to say the least. However, he also lived in relative obscurity in his own time and died broke and alone in 1943, unfortunately. Immediately after his death though, the US government immediately seized all of his property due to public safety, as Nikola Tesla was rumored to have inventions like a death ray and an earthquake machine. However, nowadays those are considered conspiracy theories. Interestingly enough, the FBI had gotten involved with his belongings, and Donald Trump's uncle, John G. Trump, he was one of the people who reviewed the patents. According to him, there was nothing of practical value. Yet, there are still a lot of missing patents from the public eye. So, did Tesla actually have super weapons? Who knows? Ask Donald Trump. Anyways, let's move on from the futuristic super tech from over 100 years ago and look at the futuristic super tech we have today, because it's getting pretty crazy. AI is like the final puzzle piece of this Iron Man suit. Look. Take the robotics, take the jet suit tech, the exoskeleton, BCI, and then you finish it off with what? AI. We basically built an Iron Man suit with the first Iceberg tier. Now, if we can merge all these things together and then actually power it to a functional and practical degree, that's Iron Man. We have Iron Man in real life. He's just in parts right now. Unfortunately, we also have Ultron in real life in most of its parts. Nearly done too, though. So, oops. AI was really only coined in the 50s with our earliest computers. Like, computers and AI, they ran side by side. That's when Alan Turing came up with the Turing test, which is basically a test we use to determine whether or not a machine can actually think. But now in 2025, the goalpost has to be moved like 20 miles back because our AI keeps passing it. AI nowadays is basically Jarvis. Have you seen the new AI glasses? That they can do that total recall thing I was talking about with the BCI that makes you a super detective. Like, you can look at something, the camera will pick it up, then you can look away, and the camera will remember everything up there. Look, you don't need a brain chip for it. Besides that, AI also does open a unique door for the possibility of more real-life superheroic action. And the existing community is already utilizing it in more practical ways to help crime fighting. Like, for example, I used an agent to compile not only a list of which crimes are most prevalent in my city, but also cross-reference those crimes to a crime database to give me an actual breakdown of which crimes happen in which part of town most often. That way I get like a little map, you know, this is the part of town you get shot, and then this is the part of town you get your car stolen. However, of course, while there are useful applications, there's also the inevitable and much more prevalent slop fest. But a RLSH AI slop isn't going to be on this list for a while, so let's just forget about that for a little while. Other inevitability people think about when it comes to AI is our Ultron scenario coming up, or Skynet, whatever, but really we don't know. AI can be a utopian liberating superhero, or it can be our greatest supervillain. We have no clue. Could it save us or kill us all? Which direction it'll end up going, who knows. But that ultimatum, they got a pretty comfy spot on this iceberg. So that does it for the first tier of the real life superhero Iceberg.
Oh boy.
Yeah, we got 5 more of these to go. That's... Look, I may have underestimated how big of a challenge this was gonna be, okay? The topic of superheroes in real life is way larger than I ever anticipated. I'm honestly kind of shocked I'm the first person to do an Iceberg about it. As far as I know, of course. But yeah, if we tackle all of that in one video, you guys aren't gonna see me in like, I don't know, 6 months or something. This took a lot of work, so I'm gonna upload this in parts. So if you stayed this long into the video, you probably like it around here. Maybe hit that subscribe button, huh? Look, it'll really help me getting the next video out faster because my life only moves as fast as my weekend and I gotta quit my day job. So, help me out here.
Subscribe to Skyline.
Help me out here. Come on.
I'm out here like Nostradamus. Know what's up, I'm astronomical. Fill my cup, smoke up the chronic. Push that love, keep being honest. Y'all hate things for the sake of safety. Y'all don't think y'all